Hello again, and welcome to Project 11.5, your personal project. We're now on week 2. Today we're going to be looking at research techniques. I've entitled the session Advanced Google Search. We're going to be doing much more than that. So let's have a quick look at what our objectives are for today. We're going to start off by looking at Advanced Google Search. Then I'm going to introduce you to Google Scholar, which is a very powerful tool for research. I'm going to show you how to reference from Google Scholar. We're going to be looking at JSTOR, which is an academic database that the library subscribes to and which you should definitely use not only for your personal project, not only for the EPQ in the future, but also for your other subjects like history, politics, biology, etc. I'm going to show you how using JSTOR you can narrow your search. I'm going to also show you what to do when you don't get enough results, how to expand your search and go the other way. And then the final thing I'm going to do, I think, which you'll find very interesting, is talk about getting different perspectives on the internet and escaping what we call your Google bubble, finding out what the other side actually thinks. And you can do that by learning to read URLs. So I'll be telling you a bit more about that. So there's a lot to cover today, but I think you'll find it extremely useful, not only for this project, but for research in general. I'm going to start off here by looking at Advanced Google Search. And what I've done is I've made another little film, which I'm now going to insert into this presentation, showing you exactly how Advanced Google Search works. Okay, so one of the main problems we face, or perhaps the main problem, is when we use Google searches, we simply get too many returns. And that can just take so much time. So we have to learn how to narrow and to focus these returns, okay? So I'm a great fan of Jaguar classic cars. You can see some here. And in particular, I'm a great fan of a Jaguar E-Type. So let's type that in and let's see what we get, okay? Well, we get over 300,000 pages of results immediately. And that's not really feasible for us to go through. Imagine if we were looking at Jaguar cars in general, we'd get over 1 million. So one of the great functions of Google, and they've made it difficult because you actually have to type it in now, is that they have an advanced search in Google. So if you type in Google Advanced Search, this page will come up. And if we look over there now, we're trying to get down from that 300,000, aren't we? We'll take this and we'll put it into a Google Advanced Search. Now at the moment it will simply give you the same returns as this particular page because we haven't used all of these other commands over here. And so we can use things like an exact phrase. Well, if we just keep that as an exact phrase, whenever you want Google to give you an exact phrase, you put it in speech marks, which means that there can be no variations on it. Might be an idea for me to put that as a capital E. I think that would be better. Now you have the opportunity of putting any of these words, and I won't be using these. You could put down here none of these words, okay? So for instance, I might want to make sure that I don't get any results in from Jaguar, the wild cat, okay? So I don't want any of that in. These numbers here, I won't be using those this time. I only want my results in English. I could narrow down my region. That's a further idea. So if I'm looking for E-Type Jags and I simply want to know about them in the UK, I'll put that in now. You have the opportunity of using different sites or domains. Safe search could be used for younger people there. And this could also be a very interesting thing. You can use different file formats, okay, and it gives you all of these different ones here, so that could help you a great deal. So let's just imagine I'm going to choose only PDFs this time. You can even look at things like usage rights, okay, so the advanced search gives you all of these options in a quick way. So if we do the advanced search now and we have a look at our results at the moment, we will see that they're narrowed down quite a lot. They narrow down to PDFs, as we said. We've taken out some of the other terms. And even here, though, you'll see that there are many different results. So, just a reminder, you simply need to type in advanced search, Google, there it is. You can go onto it, and then it will give you many of these options here for narrowing down your search. There is another way of doing this, which I'm also going to show you now. So as an alternative to using the Google Advanced Search, you can use the normal search, and there are a few commands that you might find very useful. You have to put these commands in capital letters. So say, for instance, I'm putting in Jaguar, but I'm saying not cat. I'm telling Google that I want Jaguar to be searched, but not when there's a cat. You can actually do that as a minus as well. An alternative search that you can use is to use the operator and. Again, you need to put it in capital letters. So there I'm looking for Jaguar and cat, and it's going to give me all of the results where these two terms come together. So you can either use the Google Advanced Search, or you can use the normal Google search, and you can use other operators. Now, there are one or two other ones. You can use the operator or. You can say Jaguar or cat, and that's another one that you can use. In addition to that, just a reminder that speech marks can be very, very effective in your searches. So if I wanted to look at Jaguar poaching, for instance, and I put my speech marks on, it will only give me all the sites where those two terms come together. So this time we see there are 1,300 results there. It's becoming more manageable by putting the quotation marks on. We're narrowing the search. So just a reminder that you've got two options then. You can use the advanced Google search, or you can use the Boolean operators, as we see here, and or, and the speech marks. Both of them can be very effective in terms of narrowing your search. Now, I've no doubt that you'll find advanced Google search very helpful because, as I explained, it saves so much time by allowing you to narrow and focus your researches. Another powerful tool by Google is Google Scholar. And Google Scholar is extremely valuable when you're doing academic work because it filters out all of the articles, all of the papers that are less academically respectable. So it tends to take out things like blogs, newspapers, magazines, popular websites, also a lot of fake news websites, which has become increasingly a problem in terms of the internet. And what Google Scholar does is it searches for reputable articles for established and well-known journals, well-known books, and legal opinions and journals. So it immediately focuses your research, and it helps you choose the right kind of sources for your personal project. I'm now going to show you in another film exactly how Google Scholar works and how you can apply it to this personal project, and going further when you're in the sixth form to the EPQ itself. Now, when you're studying a project, doing the EPQ next year, or doing our Project 11.5, which we're doing at the moment, the majority of the sources that you want to look at on Google should be academically respectable sources. So I'm going to be showing you something which is so valuable to me in my own studies, and I hope that you'll be using it a lot, and that's Google Scholar. Now, if you type in Google Scholar, it will take you to the site straight away. Now, Google Scholar is incredibly useful because it only will give you results that come from universities or from academically respected sources. So this is very, very valuable when you're doing coursework or schoolwork or later university work, because it's very easy to get tricked. And I'm going to be showing you another screencast where we look at some websites that give you false facts. and that can be very professional looking. So the team at Google, they tend to check out the articles that are in Google Scholar. So I'm going to show you how it works now, and I find it really absolutely fascinating. As you can see here, earlier I was looking at the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now some of you will know about that. Happened in the 1960s. It's when the world nearly came to a nuclear war between Russia and the United States over missiles being in Cuba. Now on Google Scholar now you can see that when I typed in Cuban Missile Crisis, there's over 111,000 results. There's far too many for me to be able to use. So I'm going to have to use some of those commands we've already looked at, the Boolean operators, to make sure that I can narrow down that and make that feasible. One of the things that's very useful in Google Scholar is you'll see that there's a date line, okay? Now let's imagine that I only want to look at the most recent articles on the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I'm going to push this button over here, and that means these are only articles that have been published since 2020, so they're very, very current indeed. And immediately you'll see I've gone down to 881 results. And it means that I'm really getting the latest research into the Cuban Missile Crisis. There are other tools that you can use here for sorting dates, but I'm going to concentrate now on how Google Scholar works. Now, one of the things that you need to look at when you're looking at Google Scholar is whether you can actually access these particular articles. And you'll only be able to access them if they're on JSTOR, because the school subscribes to JSTOR, or if you see that they have the file alongside. So if we scroll down here, on this particular page, you're going to be able to access 3 different ones of these articles. So let us then go and have a look at this one here. It's called Civil Military Relations, the Case of Canada and the Cuban Missile Crisis. So if we quickly click on that, it will take us to the page, and we will be able to see how much of it we can access. There it is there, and it looks as though we're going to be able to access it because it says here PDF, view and open. Now that means that if you are then on this particular PDF, you're going to be able to download it and save it and keep it for your note taking. Now going back over here, I also want to show you something that's very important, which is the abstract. The abstract is usually an overview of what the article is going to be about. And it can be very valuable because if you read it quickly now, you'll see it says here, it's about the Canadian reaction to President John F. Kennedy's television address, etc. So we now know that when we read this paper, it is going to be focused on the Canadian angle in particular. So the abstract is a very good way of you deciding whether a long essay is useful or not for you. And then going back to the Google Scholar page over here, there's one other thing which I think is really valuable, and that's the Import into BibTeX button, which you'll see over here. This can also be useful to you because you can cut paste this and save this into your notes, and it is a full history of the title, the author, and the year of publication. One of the things that you'll see whenever you do a project is it's very important that you store your references because you're going to write a bibliography and you may be using footnotes or you may be using the Harvard referencing system. In both cases, this information here will be absolutely crucial to you. So Google Scholar allows you to narrow your research down and look at highly respectable academic articles, and as you've seen, quite a number of them are accessible to us, the public, and then you'll be able to quote these, and they are the kind of academic writing that you're expected to access as you enter the sixth form and beyond when you go to university. Right, so we've looked at Google and it has multidisciplinary functions there, as we can see. We're now going to move on to look at JSTOR, which is an academic database that our library at DES subscribes to. If you want to use JSTOR, it's a very, very powerful tool. We have a username and a password that can be used by all DES students, and I wish more of you did this. In fact, I'd like to point out that you will not only use the JSTOR library when you are doing your personal project in EPQ, but also in other subjects as well. It has all sorts of subjects ranging from biology to history to politics to literature, etc. So please look at it. It can be very, very valuable. And now that you have the username and password, you can access it from any time at home. So what is JSTOR? JSTOR is an online library of trusted academic research. It includes thousands of journals, ebooks, and primary sources. So in terms of getting the right kind of sources for a project, JSTOR is a wonderful place to start, in addition to Google Scholar, which we've already looked at. If you want to find out more about JSTOR, because this is going to be quite a hasty little guide to it, I strongly suggest that you type in this, guides.jstor.org, and then you can actually do free online training if you want to get really good at research skills. Extremely valuable, especially for students who want to go on to do the EPQ in year 12. JSTOR is very reliable because its journals and articles are peer-reviewed. Now, if you're not familiar with that term, it's extremely important in terms of research, because peer-reviewed articles mean that experts in that field have looked at it. So if you read a biochemical study on JSTOR, you will know that other biochemists have looked at it and it's passed the test of credibility. So that's very important in terms of what we call the critical evaluation of sources. And good students don't only look at articles, they judge how valuable they are. That skill of evaluation that we talked about before in an earlier screencast. You can browse subjects, business, economics, history, humanities, etc., or you can use searches. Now notice here, I put in a search protest songs, and you can't see it on this screen, but when I did that earlier today, I turned up 32,000 search results. So that's not feasible. I can't look at those. So I'm reminding you that we use these Boolean operators here and or. You'll recall that we looked at those earlier in the screencast. And I'm putting down then protest songs. I'm using the quotation marks, which means that they have to be those exact words. I'm using and in capitals, which tells the computer that I want searches that are protest songs and the term civil rights. And I've just done that now on my other screen here, and I've turned up only 112 results. I could narrow those down further, but that's more doable. So it shows how important it is that we use these operators. Now, JSTOR, just like Google Scholar, has this advanced searching facility for you. And that means that you can look at the title, you can look for words within the article, you can look at the author's name, you can also look at date ranges for your articles. So especially if you're looking for more modern, contemporary research, you can change that. And here you can decide whether you're looking at articles, books, pamphlets, reviews, or miscellaneous. So all of these tools are very valuable in terms of narrowing your searches down. There is a lot more help with searches. Again, these extremely valuable JSTOR guides, which I use with EPQ students in year 12. And this one here is how to search. So I strongly recommend, if you want to, again, refine your research skills, you can go and have a little look at that. One other very important thing about JSTOR, and this is something that it shares with Google Scholar, you can get the reference. So when you're citing an article and you have to get the full reference, for instance here you get the URL where you got it on the internet, together with things like the author's name and the name of the essay and the book that it appeared in, you can use JSTOR to cite this item. So if you find something you like, you will cite the item and you will keep a record of the citation, because that will help you when you have to write your bibliography and your references. Very valuable indeed, okay? And as you can see from this, when you do use the function of cite this article, it will allow you to have different styles of referencing. I'm going to be telling you more about referencing in a screencast that follows this one. Now, something that's very important is narrowing your search, as we saw before, even when I looked at protest songs a moment ago. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to insert a quick video clip from JSTOR, which helpfully shows you how to narrow your searches, and I think you'll find it very useful.
After you've used the advanced search options to narrow down your search, reassess the results and adjust your search string accordingly. Do you keep seeing a term or idea that isn't relevant to your research? Use the not operator to exclude it from your next set of search results. Do you see a term that is useful but isn't in your search string? Using and to add it to your search string will narrow down the current set of results. You might also reassess the terms you've used. Is there a more specific version that's likely to get you fewer results and results that are more specific to your topic? A search for opera singers yields a lot of results, but a search for the more specific term, mezzo-sopranos, brings up a much smaller set. Finally, think about adding terms that narrow the search by geography, time, or discipline. A search for surfing will give you a lot of results, probably too many to wade through. But a search about surfing in Kauai, a search about surfing in the 1920s, or a search about the physiology of surfers will give you a much more focused, manageable set of results. What if you've constructed a really solid search string and refined your results as far as possible, but still have too many results to sift through? This might be a good time to reassess the database you're using. Is there another that might be better tailored to your topic? If you're using the best database with your best search skills and still flooded with search results, it's possible that your topic is just too broad. This is a good time to call on your librarian for guidance about how to use the library's resources to find the information you're looking for.
Now, in the case of desk, it's more likely that you will consult your supervisor, and for this project, your online mentor, if you're having real trouble with your search results. They're not going to do it for you, but they can give you some more search tips and some guidance in this respect. Now, there might be times when you don't get any results at all or very few results, and you need to expand your search. So we looked at narrowing your search, and I'm going to use this example here, maybe a bit of a silly example. Chlorophobia, the fear of clowns. I go into JSTOR and I do my search, and I realize that there are no results whatsoever. So in that case, I might decide to myself that my project is maybe too specific and I won't be able to find enough research material for a literature review. So instead, I'm going to do a more general search under phobias and go back to the drawing board. So I expand my research that way. Now I'm going to move on to something which is really interesting, which is the idea of different perspectives. It's so important in the world at the moment that we think about how other people feel. Very often, we think of ourselves as global citizens, but we forget that there are many different ways of looking at the world. And I'm going to show how this is really relevant to your research, okay? Now, some of you may or may not know that at the moment there is a dispute in the South China Sea. It's called the South China Sea dispute, funny enough. And it's an argument between China and all of these other countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, about this collection of islands or different collections of islands. And why it's become such an enormous dispute is their valuable oil and natural resources in these areas here. And basically what's happening is China is claiming that all of these belong to them. And if you look here at some of the Spratly Islands here, they really are very close to Malaysia and Indonesia. So this has created a huge argument between these countries. Now, the Western perspective on this is that China is simply aggressive. And they take the view that this is China trying to steal other people's land and property and resources. If we look at this particular website over here, which you can look at in your own time, it comes from MD. If you look at the URL here, MD stands for Modern Diplomacy, EU stands for European Union. It calls itself unbiased and impartial, but it speaks of Chinese aggression. Now, I want you to look at those words really carefully there, impartial and unbiased. The more you become a good researcher, the more you'll realize that there is no such thing as being impartial and unbiased, and there are always different ways of looking at things. So how is this important? Well, it's important that we also look at the Chinese perspective on the South China Sea dispute, because it's no doubt going to be very different from the Western-inspired view. And you could do that by partly using the URL, which is at the top. As we see here, I showed you before, the URL here is from the EU. If we look and we put in a site search and we use CN, which stands for China, then we'll only get web pages that are manufactured out of China. So we can see from the extension that we are then looking at another point of view from websites that come from China. And the Chinese refer to the dispute as the 9-dash line. And here they talk about the fact that they say that they have navigated this territory for over 1,000 years and that there's a long history of Chinese ownership. Now, I'm not going to comment on whether I think that that's true or not. I'll leave it to you to decide. But I think it's very important as project researchers, and even though we're only 11.5 project researchers now, very important that we start to think to ourselves, if we're serious researchers, we need to take into account different points of view. So I'll remind you to look at the URL when you look at different articles and decide which country it comes from and who's written it. In a future video podcast, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about assessing the validity and the soundness and the truthfulness of different websites. So in summary, we've had a long session today, but it's an absolutely key one. It's a level of research that you're going to begin, which is different from the work that you've done at GCSE and Key Stage 4. We've seen how advanced Google search is a very powerful tool. We've looked at Google Scholar, and we've seen that it allows you to refer exclusively to academically reputable papers. We've looked at JSTOR, an incredibly valuable database which is here in the school that many of you may not have known. We've talked about how to narrow your search using the Boolean operators. That's something that I really want you to experiment with. We've looked at the possibility that you might need to expand your search or even change your subject matter. And finally, we've looked how it's important to get different perspectives, to think closely about the URL, to think about the nature, origin, and purpose of the site, who wrote it, and in whose interest does that site occur. I hope you found that a very valuable screencast, and I look forward to seeing you again later this week.